I'm excited to have Matt Mahoney, COO of Racami, here with me on Above the Tree Line. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Good to be here.
Yeah, hey, and Matt, we've got a lot of stuff to cover, but first, I thought for those that aren't super familiar with Racami, if you could share with us a little bit about the Racami history. I mean, you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually grew out of a PSP, right? NCP.
We did, yeah. So 18 years ago, Haney, our founder, Haney Koloff, um, actually before that, he owned another company that was a print service provider, and
Okay,
so they grew that little company and they sold it to NCP, and
which is now
NCP.
OSG, right?
Yeah,
Yep, yep,
NCP actually got bought by Harlan Clark, and then eventually
that's right. I
OSG.
forgot about that.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, he's from the space, I'll say the transactional print and mail space,
Right.
and had a company, sold it, and then became part of NCP and the Harlan Clark organization, and then they were private equity backed, and they had an event, where they were selling off, and he was able to acquire some of the technology that started Racami, and that technology was a dashboard because
Yeah.
back then it was important for companies, especially if they had multiple facilities, just to see, visibility of where jobs are and the statuses of those files and jobs and things they're producing was important. Still is important.
Yep. Yep.
And
No, I remember that. I was a competitor and it was like, oh my gosh, something
yeah,
brand
yeah,
new. Pretty pictures is what we called it, but
yeah, pretty
that's
pictures,
really
exactly.
belittle what was actually going on.
That launched the
Yeah.
company,
So that
Racami, and so the dashboard was there, and that has evolved over the course of 18 years into including workflow, automation, functions to do work. So you think about the space as over the last 20 years has software companies in particular have evolved. Is you had printers, and then you had AS400s and mainframes that were connecting to these old printers in the 70s, and then they needed transforms because IBM had AFP and Xerox had Metacode and
yeah.
LCDS, and then you had these desktop applications coming around that spit out PCL and PostScript, and then PDF came, and so there's this whole evolution where software companies were, um, you know, finding their space to transform data, to help with print management, to do all these kinds of things, and anyway, so we started adding functions that would do those things that you would traditionally find in one of these software providers. So a print stream transform or a print manager, an
Yeah.
archiving system, document composition, proofing, all these functions we started to add to the platform. So, today we sell something that's very complete as a whole solution for file processing, or if you just want, a point solution, we can sell you that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've come a long way over the years.
Yeah. So, I mean, Rackham looks different in the marketplace. The way that you talk about the industry, the way that you present yourself at events, it's new and exciting, and it's needed in my view. But what is the philosophy? I mean, what is sort of the thing that drives Rackham? What is it that you know? How do you define your philosophy in terms of how you're approaching the market? Because I think
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, to us, it's not that, earth-shattering or unique, but maybe it is to others. But we're looking to solve a customer problem, right? And so it always starts with that because you can make products, but if they don't solve problems, nobody's going to buy them. And so we're looking at that, and we're smaller, so we can move quickly. And as we're engaged with the customer, if they need something, developed during the project, usually we can respond and develop those things quickly. So the problems we're solving might be a little bit unique, and what we're really good at is integrations. So
Hmm.
if you had to say one thing about Rackham, what would we do? Well, it would be integrations, and that's kind of bubbled us up to the top of a lot of these more complicated problems that are out there in the market, especially with consolidation of transaction printers and commercial printers and direct mailers. There is consolidation in the market, and that's creating opportunities for us as an integrator to help these companies uh, find synergies. Right, so
Hmm.
they might buy five different companies, and now they got to merge those companies together, and that's a big task, and
Yeah.
something that print service providers need help with, and we've developed a core competency there. We have software that works there for integration, And so that's kind of our sweet spot.
Just at IPMA.
I was.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I should say you and Caitlin
Yep.
and the
Caitlin
team.
was there. Yep. She won an award there, which was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. Congratulations to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what are you hearing? I mean, it's we have so few events now that are sort of focused on sort of the traditional, I guess I'll say print components. Um, where are the implants going? Where are they seeing opportunity? Where are they seeing growth? And I guess specifically where is Racami sort of helping plug into that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting for us because we hadn't been to IPMA in a long, long time. And we decided to get back involved because the transaction space is consolidating. There aren't as many customers for us there. That's not like a growing number of customers. So we're looking to shift to continue to support that group, but also commercial printers and direct mailers, which is not a heavy lift for us because they want to do a lot of the same things that our traditional customer does. The transaction processors. So we went to IPMA, and it was really interesting. We got a lot of conversations going. People were really thirsty for integration and also for finding ways to add value to the organization, right? And that's always
Right,
that's always a thing for an implant. They don't want to be outsourced,
right,
right? And so
right.
they're trying to find ways to
Continue to
support.
create value. Exactly.
Yep, yep, to create value, and to market that value, make sure that people in the company are aware of these capabilities that they have. And
Right.
so a lot of the discussions were around that, probably not too surprising to anybody who talks to implants, but integrations was a big part of the conversation. Customer facing portals where and it was a great session. And one of the things we learned from Martin, just he's been a customer of ours for about 6 years now. And they hired him to set up their print operation, right? So they're in insurance and they have an implant, and they needed to modernize it. And so they hired him as a consultant to come in, and then they eventually hired him as a manager of that area. And he transformed it completely, like automation. He brought in our software and some other things, and just completely renovated and made it amazing. I mean, it's really an amazing shop. It's small, but it produces a large amount of work and a lot of types of work for that little space that they have. And now today he's been promoted several times, and now he's the let me see, I just got an email from him. His title is like VP of Customer Communications for the entire insurance company. So
All
so
right.
we
Well,
asked
you
so
can
we asked him.
guarantee that for every customer that implements
Yeah,
Rackham. So
but we asked him, Martin, how did you do this, right? And he said, you know what I did that's I think every implant can learn from is we provide a service to the organization no matter what it is. If somebody needs something and we don't do it, we're going to help them find the right person in the organization who can help them.
hmm,
If they need accounting, we're going to walk them over to accounting.
right.
If they need something delivered to the other building, we're going to deliver. Like so he said we became just a general resource to fill gaps in communication and getting things done in the organization. And so as an implant, we weren't just the people you send the print job to. We became a resource for all kinds of things that people would need done within the company that are sort of non-standard or that fill the cracks.
Oh,
And
that's really interesting. Including
yes,
outsourcing, I would expect too, if they had to find some outside
yep,
third party to support.
100%. Yep,
Yeah.
he could help you find vendors, all kinds of things. So that's the approach he took is I'm going to be the resource for the company for just about anything I can get my hands on. And then he ended up being invited to executive meetings and eventually became the VP of communications for the organization. So
Yeah.
I think that's a lesson in how an implant can be more like a print service provider.
You mentioned a term that I think is incredibly relevant, which is consolidation. And I think we're seeing consolidation in many different forms, right? We're taking multiple cut sheet devices and maybe moving it to a high-speed inkjet device, or taking a fleet of inserters and modernizing, or consolidating different application types, right? Transactional, direct marketing, other types of more traditional mainstream kind of print applications in one place. I guess you can look at that from an implant perspective, but how are you just sort of seeing that more generally in the marketplace? This whole idea of consolidation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, consolidation, in one respect, for us, it reduces the number of customers, but in another respect, it creates opportunities. right? Because
Mhm.
different problems to solve when the markets are consolidating. And so I don't see that slowing down, but I also see the consolidation is creating new types of companies.
Oh,
So we are part of an organization that has for 30 years been a group of transaction processors. And now if you ask the people in the meeting to raise their hand, and there might be 100 of them in the room, who does direct marketing, commercial print, and transaction processing in one company, half the hands go up in the room,
they're
right?
doing it all.
So they're not so isolated anymore into their specialties. You get these hybrid companies that through consolidation are doing all kinds of different work. They might be printing signs in one building and doing bills in another, but
Right.
it's still the same organization. And in that kind of situation, it creates a need for software to run the business that handles all this different kind of work,
Yeah, that
right?
diversification of applications is just, I talk about that again in our white paper about complexity, right? It's just
Yeah,
this stuff has now become more complex and more critical, and data and security and all these things. Even in, I think, applications you wouldn't normally be thinking about those kinds of things, it's starting to creep in. Like, don't have the skills or the money to invest in this kind of technology anymore. I got a great book of print business here, but that's kind of all I have. And so we're starting to see, I think, the early stages of what we've seen happen in the rest of the world is these companies are going to start merging and consolidating. And I think we're going to start seeing that accelerate. But we had talked a little bit about sort of the implications of that from maybe from a valuation perspective, or the way the investment banks or the private equity firms are looking at print service providers. And I think specifically in terms of their technology stack. And yeah, you can go over there and say, hey, that's a really cool big printer over there, and you can kick it and you can smell it and you can hear it. But the software is the thing that's actually creating the value in the business. And you talked a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing there, and just if you could just share a little bit about that, but for you're seeing from a
yeah,
Racami
yeah.
perspective.
We sell, sometimes the solution that we sell can be big dollars, right?
Right.
As much as a printer or more.
Sure.
And it can take a year, maybe longer, to deploy some of these things because we might be replacing a 20-year-old system that's doing file processing, and it does a lot of stuff and it takes a while to replace it. And but a lot of the conversations these days for the bigger, let's say a company that's consolidated, they have 5 different companies they bought, is they'll say, Matt, look, if I spend all this money with you to do this integration of these systems so that I get some workflow efficiencies and people aren't doing double data entry, from the MIS to the or storefront to the MIS, whatever, um, you know, what am I going to have at the end? Like, it's hard for them to calculate the ROI, to have like a tangible understanding of at the end of this long project, am I really going to have some gains? If you buy a
Right.
printer, you can install it pretty quick. You know what the printer does. You know how fast it runs. You can run the numbers on it,
What
and you
your
can,
costs are, right? Yep. Yep.
yeah, you know your cost and your revenue, and you're going to make some money, right? But on a software project where you're getting into workflow, it's a little more ambiguous, and so that there can be analysis paralysis. You can have we're just not going to do anything. We're going to kick the can down the road. But there's all these things, and they're really a result of just not understanding. And us as a software provider have to do a better job, and probably many others in the software space, of explaining what the benefit is of the investment they're going to make, right, in that
Mhm.
software, because it's not always clear.
Yeah. And do you have
Yeah.
sort of a standard framework that you use when you sort of answer that question, or?
In 30 years of selling software, I haven't done a lot of ROI analysis, believe it or not, because a lot of times the software, at least that I've been selling, is sort of a must-have, right? You got to have it to be in this space to do this kind of work, and so there hasn't been a lot of need for demand from our customers to do an ROI. But when you get into workflow, and it's not like this thing that you have to have dashboards and workflow automation, things like that, then it's a little more fluffy. Your business can survive without it. You're running your business today, right? But there's inefficiencies there, and if you get rid of those inefficiencies, what's the value of that gain? And so that's where the thinking has to go. So I would say it's becoming more of an issue. It's our conversations are more around this than they ever have been, where the
Right.
the customers are spending more money on a solution, and they want to make sure that that investment's going to pay off. We started an AI committee maybe 3, 4 months ago. Just different people from different departments in our company come together once a week, and they focus on AI. And we come up with ideas. What do we think would be useful for our customers? What could be useful for us internally? What do we think about the security implications, IP protections, all kinds of things, right, that go on with AI. And for us in the space that we live in the market, we're sort of like the plumbing a lot of times.
Yeah.
Then we're looking at things like script generators. So if you look at in our space, there's a lot of different file types, and you got to get files normalized into an automation system so that the automation can run. So how do we tackle that problem with all these different kinds of files coming into a funnel and apply AI to normalize, first of all, identify the kind of data it is, identify the discrete data elements, first name, last name,
Yeah,
totals,
the
whatever, right?
indexing kind of stuff.
Yep,
Yeah.
scrape it, index it, identify that data. AI is great for that kind of stuff, and then put that into the database. So that's an area we see could add good value. AI works in that space. We built some prototypes, and they're very good, and so we're going to continue working on that problem. Of course, you see it with the composition providers for content generation and
Mhm.
recommending paragraphs and text and things that would go into a letter that make the most sense for the business application, right? So the content generators, I think, can use AI effectively. And of course, we use it for our emails and all that kind of stuff. Every email I send out now has gone through the AI
It's
engine. Yeah.
I
And
just like we're all starting to get dumber, but I don't know. I'm going to work hard to
yeah,
try not to let that happen.
yeah. So that's a couple of areas where we see, that could be they're practical. They're really so much going on in our space right now. We hired Caitlin. You mentioned her name earlier. About 2 years ago, she's been with us for 2 years, and she came from the infrastructure space. She sold, you know, uh, just a server,
Yeah.
rack space kind of stuff, right? And so she came to print, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Matt, print." When I told my husband I was going to a print company, he was like, "Well, that's so boring." Right. And then she's like, no, there's
Welcome to our
technology.
world.
Yeah, there's technology. There's all kinds of things going on in the print space, right? So it's not really boring. If you're a technology person, and you like workflows, or you like manufacturing, or there's so many things going on that I just feel like it's a great space to be. A lot of people say print's dying, but it's a lot of stuff's going digital, and that creates these complexities where we need solutions. And so if you're an inventor, a creator, a business person, you like technology, you like manufacturing. I mean, there's so many things that this space has to offer that I feel there's going to be, it'll look differently in the future than it does today.
Right.
But as we evolve, I think is just going to be a different kind of thing, and we can all take that journey.
Yeah. I'm always
Yeah.
very careful about saying print is not dying, although certain forms of print, particularly printing on paper, and specifically communications on paper, are definitely challenged, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But taking everything we know about creating critical communications and applying it to personalized products that might be some industrial application that's printing shirts or whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, do we care if it's a letter or if we care it's a coffee mug that's got some important data? I don't know. It
Yeah.
seems like there's print in and of itself is expansive and growing and super exciting. There's just
Yeah.
other pieces of it that are a little more
I agree.
challenging. But
Yeah, that's the evolution, right? Some things die off, some things grow, and we follow that growth, as an
yeah,
industry. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, I really appreciate your time today for sharing with us, and just some great insight from Racami. I really appreciate your point of view and what you guys are doing in the marketplace. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Andy.